All right, still talking International Literacy Day, which is celebrated September 8th every year. And joining us is Segun Shokpekon, is an educationist. Thank you for joining us again.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to your show, and I'm happy to discuss what literacy is. It's a moment that I love discussing, and it's a
Well, the volume is quite low. If you could speak up a little bit more so we could hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I want to believe that you can hear me down there in the studio, and I want to believe that today we are going to have a nice session on what literacy is. It's good to speak on the topic World Literacy Day. This is a topic I love discussing. Thank you.
Apparently, as an educationist. But let's talk about Nigeria, because, of course, the focus is on local communities, how to make literacy better. But first, let's start with the definition of what literacy means.
Okay. Literacy simply means the ability to write, to read and write. And not just to read and write, but to be able to communicate well in the society and to mingle well with people. For you to be able to read, for you to be, it's not even compulsory that you must be able to write very well, but just have a little ability to read and just mumble some words. That is the essence of this thing. Nobody's talking about being proficient particularly, but the opportunity that one has to read and write, that is what we are talking about, literacy. Then when we take it further, we are not talking about proficiency in literacy. But first off, in Nigeria, are we really a literate society? I say no. Because the percentage ratio of literacy to illiteracy is very, very wide.
Of course, we'll get to all of that because we have to look at the factors. And as you said, statistics shows that 35% of Nigerians are literate, and that is pretty low. So let's talk about the factors responsible for this low percentage.
Oh, fantastic. The factors are just there. One, the government is not doing enough in terms of education. If you look at the percentage of our budget that is earmarked or allocated to education, it is pretty low. And look at it even at this point in time. ASU is on strike, and we are talking about literacy day. The people that we are talking about who will become our graduates, several of them, when they go back to school now, they will be rushed through their education. They come out half-baked graduates, and we are talking about literacy. We talk about literacy as well. Look, go to the streets, go to the roads. You will see several Nigerian youths, adolescents, hawking wares. And this is another factor that makes our level of illiteracy to be high, because several states are not really concerned. But if you look at the comparison in terms of which state is doing more in terms of education, almost all of them are not doing the best. Yes, they are trying, but there are some states that are not even doing what is expected of them in terms of their budget allocation. So that is another one. The government does not really see the need for them to improve our literacy. And that is why we are having several people that are dropouts, several people that are hawkers, several people that are traders, several people that are supposed to be acquiring skills. They are not even involved in it because the enabling environment has not been provided for them. Apart from that, if you look at governments in the past, in the 70s and the 80s, under Latif Dakonde and Co., they provided means for free education. How many governments are doing that now? Are they telling us that they cannot provide free education with the huge resources they have? Are they telling us that they don't have the means any longer?
Well, some people will tell you, to butt in there, some people will tell you that the population back then in the 70s and the 80s is not the same as what we have now.
Fantastic. That is a very good and very inadequate analysis. If you talk about the population in the 80s and the population now, as the population is growing, what efforts have the government put in place to checkmate illiteracy? Because as the population is growing, you should also be thinking of how to ensure that your population, that is the youth and the school age people are there, they are taken care of. If you have been taking care of them year in, year out, we will not be having dropouts. If they have been taken care of year in, year out, we will not be having miscreants, hawkers on the street. Rather, more people would be in school. Now, let me give you a little experience of what they used to do in the past. In Lagos, we had what we call School Management Committee or Commission, SMC. They would go around in the morning to ensure that any child that is seen that not in school, they pick the child, they will make sure that the parents are dealt with. They will ensure that that child must go to school. What effort is the government putting in place these days? SMC would go around. Districts that we have now, they don't even bother themselves about such. The government is not even bothered about such. And any child, if you are in uniform, you are still found on the road at 8 a.m., you will be arrested. Picked to your school, you will be dealt with in your school. And if you are a child, you are not in school, you will also be picked up. So no child was found wanting or strolling the streets aimlessly in the morning. And that was why everybody at that point in time was able to achieve education, literacy. Nobody's talking about you being a proficient person per se, but have something that you can do in terms of writing and reading. But as you go up in subsequent stages of your life, you will improve yourself.
Okay.
And those were the things that the government did that enabled the level of literacy to be increased and illiteracy to be reduced.
Okay, beyond the role of the government or the lapses that you've just mentioned from the part of the government, what other factors? How about the quality of the education? That those who opine that back then the quality of education in the 60s, 70s, even down to the 80s was really up there to the best you can obtain in the Western world. But right about now, that is not the case.
Education, like you have just said, the quality of education these days, I must tell you, it's not it. Because if you look at our public schools, several parents would not want their children to go to public schools. Why? Because they believe that the teachers there are not doing enough.
No.
But I disagree with you. If indeed the teachers are not doing enough, we will not have people, graduates, coming from the public school who are excelling as well. But in terms of the quality of education now, I want to say this is a fact. The private sector has taken over the quality of education because they ensure that with the money the students pay, their parents get value for their money. In terms of the public school, the structure is not really helping matters, and I will explain what I mean by the structure. In terms of supervision, the teachers at times don't really put in their best because they are not properly checked. If indeed they are properly checked, they are supervised, and there are checks and balances, the quality of education will improve. The government too needs to motivate the public school teachers so that the quality of education will improve. Like I said in my initial comment, ASU is on strike for the past 7 months. Now, what do we say about the quality of education in Nigerian public universities?
But Shadow, is it just a case of motivating the teachers, or do we have quality teachers, qualified teachers? You'd recall in Kano State recently, the state governor, was it Kano or Kaduna? Kaduna rather, sacked several teachers because they could not pass a simple, elementary test that they even give the pupils. So is it just a case of motivating the teachers, or also ensuring that these teachers are qualified?
Okay, thank you very much. If you say the teachers you have in school are not qualified, how did they get in? They got in through a means. So that means what I'm talking about in terms of checks and balances are not really put in place. Now, for any structure, you have discovered, like the governor of Kaduna State, El Rufai, discovered that the teachers he has in the schools are not qualified enough. What do? You definitely take the nice measure to yank them off, to remove them from the school. But how did they get into the school in the first place? Structure, checks and balances. So if you talk about the quality of teachers, they need to go through tests to ascertain that they are qualified enough to go into the teaching profession. Somebody must have employed them, or a group must have employed them. Invariably, that means we are back to square one. man knows man, frivolities, friendship, affinity, and what have you. Because if teachers are indeed screened and employed based on quality, I'm telling you, it will not be like that. Let me tell you something we don't really understand. In Lagos here, I am not speaking boldly for Lagos, but I'm telling you some of the measures they put in place. For you to qualify to be a teacher, there are tests you will go through. And those tests, I'm not saying all of them are good, though. I've not said everybody in public school in Lagos is good. But I'm telling you that at least you will have an appreciable number, say give 75, 80, that is qualified. And there is something they also do as well. Nigerian Teachers Council. I get it? That council ensures that teachers register and they verify their credentials. So these are some of the steps that need to be put in place. So I will want to say that the quality of teachers is very important, but they got their way into the teaching employment one way or the other, and the people that employ them must also be visited.
Okay. In ensuring that we transform the literacy learning space, from the quality teachers to quality education being offered to these students, where's the place of a very good curriculum as well? Because you go to some schools and the curriculum doesn't match up with what's obtainable in other climes, so that these students can be at par with their peers in terms of knowledge acquisition. So what's the role of a very good curriculum in the quest of transforming the space?
Okay, now let me tell you, first off, I wouldn't want to blame it on curriculum, because the curriculum we use in terms of teaching in Lagos and even in Nigeria, it is standard. Yes, the curriculum is standard and it has been approved by a body. When I say it is standard, it has passed through checks, and those checks ensure that the curriculum meets the needs of the children. Now, for example, if you talk about the curriculum, it is now left for the teachers in the various schools to ensure that they adapt the curriculum to the best possible way for the children to learn in the appropriate manner. Some schools shy away from some of this curriculum. The activities they are supposed to teach them, they don't. Lesson notes are not properly prepared. The practice they are supposed to give them in terms of practicals and what have you, they are not often carried out.
So shouldn't there be regulatory bodies to ensure and enforce that all of these are done, and of course bring to both those who are defaulting?
There are regulatory bodies. The Ministry of Education is there. The WAEC officials are there. NECO officials are there. They always go around to schools to ensure that they check from time to time, and that's what we call quality assurance. The quality assurance officials go from one school to the other in every session to ensure that they check the curriculum, the scheme of work, and the lesson notes of the teachers and those of the students as well. Invariably, some teachers still maneuver some of these things, and that is why we talk about the quality of education. But by and large, I want to stress this. The quality of education we have in the private sector these days outweigh that of the public sector. Do you know why? Because the checks in the private sector are there, while the checks in the public sector are not always stringent. And that is why some teachers are lackadaisical in their approach to teaching. They don't always go to classes regularly, and even the population in the public school, if you go to some classes, the teachers overwork themselves. The teachers are really trying. They overwork themselves because of the population they have in the classes. Imagine a situation where a teacher has to teach like 80 students in a class, and he has several hands, A, B, C, D, up to F, or even G or H. And you expect that teacher alone to mark all the lesson of the notes of the students, give them more work assignment and what have you. The teacher is overworked with all of this. So these are some of the challenges that make some of these teachers to relax the level they should go. But when you get to private sector, you discover that it's not the same. I'm not here to compare the two. We're only talking about the quality. And I'm making you to understand why we have this challenge in school system. So the population is high. They need more personnel in the public sector to improve the quality of education and the workload on individual teachers.
Okay, if you say the population is high in public schools, which definitely is the truth, isn't that because private schools are more expensive for the average Nigerian to afford in terms of sending their children to such schools? So should there be some sort of, regulatory, I won't call it a price cap, but should there be some sort of regulation to the charges of private schools so that the average Nigerian can afford that? That's one.
Thank you very much for this question.
Okay.
If you talk about the fees paid in private schools,
yes,
I would disagree with you that it is flat. It is not flat. You have not said that, but I'm telling you that there are schools and there are categories of schools.
Okay.
There is category A, there is category B, there is category C. It now depends on the parents on what they can afford. There are several schools. If you like, you take your child to a particular school, maybe Corona and Co. in their class. There are other schools in every vicinity that you can afford the school fees.
Okay.
And where you cannot afford a particular school fee, look for the one that your child will be in and you can afford. So it's not compulsory that we say there must be a cap on the fees. No, we can't put that because they are in this business to ensure that they maximize their profit because they will pay their members of staff and their personnel. So there can never be a cap. Definitely, parents should look for schools where they can afford the fees. In every area, there are schools that the fees are affordable.
Okay, in wrapping up this conversation, we know Nigeria has the highest number of out-of-school children, and as and being the literacy they were trying to transform, literal learning spaces and all of that. How can the federal government, in about a minute, please, how can the federal government address this issue of out-of-school children, especially in the northern region that is bedeviled with insecurity?
Thank you very much for this. First, you have mentioned it, insecurity. Will you establish a school where there is insecurity? No. Who would attend it? Nobody.
Okay.
You will discover that several people in Borno, in Bauchi, in Yobe, in Adamawa, they have left their communities because of insecurity.
Yes.
First, the government needs to tackle insecurity.
Okay.
Once insecurity challenge has been tackled, then you begin to talk about establishing schools in such areas. But where insecurity is not properly tackled, definitely schools can be established. You look at the government of Mr. Goodluck Jonathan, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan Ebele. He established several schools there, even quality schools with facilities, modern facilities. Eventually, how many people are attending those schools? Because of insecurity, they can't attend those schools. So first, for the government to ensure that out of school children are taken back to school, definitely insecurity must be tackled. Secondly, there must be motivation. And what are those motivations? Free education. I will still tell you that the government can bring back free education.
Okay.
From the income tax that we are having, from the what do you call this tax again that you buy on goods? I'm sorry, skipped my memory now. VAT, thank you very much. So a little percentage of it can also be diverted into VAT, from VAT into education use, and this will help enable the government. And I'm just telling you, there is something that the government is not getting right. If I have the opportunity to advise anybody in government, they should reintroduce the toll gates at every point. And I will explain why I'm saying this. There is so much money the government will get if they are sincere from the establishment or reintroduction of toll gates, which will, one, reduce accidents on our roads, which will, two, increase government revenue, which will, three, reduce level of insecurity, because at every toll gate or point, there will be mass presence of security personnel. And those things would enable motorists to move freely. Some roads are not motorable, not because they are bad, but because of insecurity. Some people are not there. So if government reintroduces it, definitely government revenue will increase, and some of these monies will be deployed to educational sector, and also for the use of repairs of our roads and several other aspects. Government will not have to burden itself on this. So I am saying that there are several things that the government can do. introduce toll gates.
Okay.
Also, the VAT, take a little percentage of it, divert to education, and give free education. By giving free education, several youths or adolescents would go back to school and they will be enrolled.
Okay.
And we will not be having problem of insecurity, miscreants, and what have you.
Okay. Thank you.
Country.
Thank you very much for your time on the show this morning.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much. That was Segun Shokpeko, an educationist, speaking to us about the World Literacy Day, which has to do with transforming the literacy learning space. We're going to break now. When we return, the show continues. Please do stay with us.